Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennie Nash. I'm founder and CEO of Author Accelerator, and I'm so excited to be here today with Jada Lightning, one of our certified coaches who was certified in September 2022. And I just am here to talk to Jada about her path to book coaching and what she's doing now. So welcome.
Thanks, Jenny. Really excited to be here and kind of discuss this with you. I love being a book coach, so I'm glad we get to talk about it.
I can't wait to hear the whole story. So, how did you come to book coaching? What was your path? Because I think you've had some very interesting jobs in your life. So, I'm curious to hear how you came to book coaching.
So I'll try to condense this because it is rather long, but my day job right now, my day job is I'm a naval officer, and I have been a naval officer for 21 years. And so I started out, I majored in chemistry. I'm very left and right brain. So I majored in chemistry, and then I was a nuclear engineer for about 12 and a half years in the Navy, on aircraft carriers and ships. And then I really just was dissatisfied with my career, and I really wanted to make a change. And so very interestingly enough, life coaching came up in there. I was like, I think I would be a very good life coach. And it was very strange. I read all these books about it. But then the Navy opened up a different avenue for me. So I became something called a foreign area officer. And it's essentially what the State Department does, only we're military officers who work in embassies. And so I've had a lot of cool experiences with that. But again, there was a point where I was dissatisfied. You know, when you're dissatisfied, it's kind of like a guide that you want to change something. And I had this bad experience in 2021 around December. I had moved back to the States from Turkey to do a new job at the Pentagon. I was kind of in this space where I was just very unhappy. And I was like, what is this really what I want to do with the rest of my life? And I can't tell you how I stumbled upon it, but I stumbled upon the blueprint because I read every craft book I can find. And I thought, oh, this is so, it's very easily implementable. It's practical. I am also a writer. And so I've been trying to figure out, okay, well, I get all of these different frameworks, right? Save the cat, et cetera. But how do you get from scene to scene? How do you make that make sense? And I found the blueprint instantly, like it made so much sense. But within the blueprint, I believe maybe you reference read books all day and get paid for it.
Yes.
I am the target audience. I don't know if you know that, but you wrote that book for me, and I was the target audience for that book. So I devoured the blueprint, read books and get paid all day, and then from read books and get paid all day, I found the word book coach. I'd never heard of it before, but it was like coming home. It's like that's what I had been looking for the whole time, And so I was so excited. I went on Author Accelerator and I saw how much it costs. And I was like, oh, I was like, this is really like a touchstone for you. Reading, you are a reader. You've been a reader your whole life. This is like magic, And I kind of looked around and I previewed the class and I just went for it. In January of 2021, I said, this is a goal that I'm going to set for myself because it was exciting. And it was also something that I was looking for. There was an editor that I was working with that I really liked, but I wanted her to coach me, but I didn't have the language to talk about what I was looking for. And she didn't understand that that's what I was looking for. But if you look at things like RevPit or Author Mentor Match and all these programs, which every year get more and more people, a lot of people are looking for that guidance and that kind of guide. And so, like I said, it was like, I spent my whole life studying for this Jeopardy category and then I got it in double Jeopardy. You know what I mean? Like it was just, everything made sense and it connected. And so then I became a book coach. I love Author Accelerator. I just think it's such a rigorous program. It's like a rigorous training program that gives you a framework and a diagnostic tool to really kind of analyze what you're looking at. And one of the things that you always say that I think is so important here is that there's no real, this is all very much like internship. That's how people learn to be agents, and you learn it by doing it. But here's a good framework and a method, maybe like a method to go through this. And so I just found it super exactly what I was looking for.
I love this story. So I want to go back, way back to when you became a chemistry major. At that time in your life, were you a reader? Did you love writing and reading back all the way back then and as a child?
I did. When I think about being a child, like I had a detective series where I had a detective who would solve crimes, and he would go to
Wait,
different
you wrote
countries and
this?
planets. I wrote this as like a little kid. I was super into books. I was so into books that my mom, for punishment, my parents would just not take me to the library. Like that was my punishment. And I would cry about it. Like I love books that much. Isn't that sad? I don't know. So, but
No, it's
at the
great. So were you reading like Encyclopedia Brown and Nancy Drew and all
Harry
those?
the Spy, all of those. I was reading everything I could get my hands on. I would get like 20 books a week. My mom had to limit it. She'd be like, "We're coming back next week. Stop getting all the books. You can't take 30 books every week. Just take like 12." That was my limit, 12 a week. And then we would go back. But then my dad was like, "You're also really good at math and science, and you need to feed yourself. So maybe you should consider becoming a doctor." And I was like, "Okay, I'll be a doctor," which is how I ended up majoring in chemistry at the Naval Academy. Um, which was a strange path because I don't like blood. I didn't realize that about myself until like I was 21 and I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll be a nuclear engineer. So very strange path. And like I said, it's like coming back to what I'm really interested in, I think, in a lot of ways.
But I want to stick with this for a minute because I find this so fascinating for so many reasons. Um, so that message of you got to feed yourself is one so many people get when they love something in the arts, or
Mm-hmm.
something that our culture doesn't think there's a path to feeding yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. Can you just talk about that? Obviously, our parents who say those things mean so well. And what parent is going to say, "Oh, don't worry about don't worry about having a career that's going to pay." Like no parent is going to say that. But what what did it feel like to turn away from the thing you loved? I mean, you really turned away. You went to the Naval Academy and studied chemistry, and you
Mm-hmm.
were this kid who loved books. Were you like squirreling books away while you were training? Did you just leave it all behind? What was that change like?
I still read. I mean, it's such a big part of me that I still constantly read books. I love fiction a lot back then, especially magical realism, literary fiction. And so I would just, go to Barnes and Nobles and buy a book, and I would have my books or go to the library, rent, or get books in addition to my studies. So for me, reading, I never left reading behind. That was still a love for me. But I do feel like I kind of took a detour with the nuclear engineering, all that stuff. But I think, my parents' concerns are, I think class, race, gender all play into these things. My parents are not wealthy, obviously. A lot of us don't have wealthy parents. And I think their concern was just that we are not a support system for you in that way financially,
Right,
and we
right.
really want you to be able to support yourself. And so, even though I think that message is maybe difficult kind of to receive when you really want to do something else, I understand the practical uses of it. And even though it's taken me 20 years to kind of come back around to it, the day job kind of gave me the space I needed to
Mhm.
really explore it. I'm not, one of the things that happens with freelancers, as you know, is that, you got to keep the lights on. And if you're doing your freelancing to keep the lights on, it adds a different layer of stress, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so I think doing it now in my 40s by doing it when I was 20, there's a maturity aspect to it, but there's also, I just have a lot of space for myself in a
Right.
way, a lot of self understanding. And when I was 20, I think it would have been just a lot more of a struggle where
Right.
I may have like given up on it in some way, I guess.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's interesting. And before we leave that part of your life, I'm curious where the overlap is between chemistry and the path you took to nuclear engineering and to the job you have of foreign, what did you say,
Area
foreign
officer? Mm-hmm.
area officer. The skills or the talents or the energies that you do in those roles and in those topics, do you see an overlap to reading and writing and book coaching, or are they really separate, just separate brain functions? What do you think?
I think that, I'm going to quote you, and you always quote that quote where you say, what art is science plus creativity. Is that the quote?
That's the Borges quote. Yeah, art
Mm-hmm.
is fire plus algebra.
Fire plus algebra. And so I think that, being kind of equally left and right brain kind of brings this interesting mix to it. And I find that when I look, for instance, if I'm doing a sensitivity read or developmental edit, and I'm looking through something, my brain can catalog it very kind of scientifically. And then I can look kind of from the left side and look at it from an artistic way and see the creative aspects as well. Part of my job involves learning a language. So I've learned Spanish and I've learned Turkish when I was in my late 30s, right? So, people talk about how difficult it is to learn a language. But I think all of these things kind of contribute, and I could talk about this all day, metacognition and neuroplasticity, but it really keeps your mind kind of agile. And I feel like I can draw on all of these things, and it gives me kind of this wide, expansive view that I'm able to apply to different projects.
Wow. So the learning of a language, when you're sent somewhere, you're sent there with the directive to learn the language of that country.
Yeah, so the Navy, I'm a naval officer, but for Turkish, they sent me we have a language school in Monterey where they teach a bunch of languages. So I went there for 6 months to learn Spanish, and then I did some things in South America. And then for Turkish, I went to a language school for a year. I learned the language, and then I went to Turkey. And I found a Turkish husband through my language skills. So
good job.
Very, very beneficial. So
that's an incredible thing. I ask because I find, and I don't know if this is just the way that I approach book coaching or running a business or anything, but the constant learning and the constant curiosity and the weaving together of different knowledges and just concepts, and that's what keeps me so stimulated. I feel like this work is just endlessly interesting. I don't know. So it's
fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you bringing that aspect to the work. So fast forward, you find book coaching, you get certified with Author Accelerator, and now you've really only been out with this certification for, when we're talking here, 6 or 9 months or so. How is it going out there, putting this service out there? And did you start from scratch?
Well, so kind of there was a lot of synchronicity involved in like finding your book and Author Accelerator. At the same time, I had found on Twitter that there is something called Tessera Editorial, and it's basically an editorial group for freelance BIPOC editors with the goal to help improve representation in the publishing industry, which is very much white, as you already know. And so I did their internship, which was just 12 weeks where, people would come to talk to us about various topics. We learned different things, but we also got assignments. And this was completely free. You can volunteer for it. They just take your name down. But you got some assignments. And so I did a developmental edit. I was horrible at copy editing, but I was good at developmental editing and sensitivity reading. So I got basically, if they ask you to come on as a not staff because you're still a freelance author, but then you could be part of the board. And so we have different contacts with publishing houses, and we have different contacts, and so we get these different jobs. And so I've gotten a lot of opportunity through that as well. And so I did. We did something called We Need Diverse Books had something called Black Creatives Revision. And there were, I think, 12 participants. So I got 4 people that I mentored for like 4 months last year, basically completely rewrote their books or whatever. And then it's kind of a learning process for them. And it was great. I got a lot of hands-on coaching. And so because I'm involved with Tessera, I've just gotten a lot of opportunities to do things where I think as a freelancer, when you're starting out, it's kind of hard to find customers. But through that editorial board, I've gotten a lot of really cool work. I got to do 10 queries with an editor for RevPit. So I got to, just kind of see what they commented on, what they were looking at, queries. I just did so many I did so many sensitivity reads. It's something that I really enjoy. And I enjoy developmental edits. So I did like a science fiction fantasy series. But I think for me, the process has been a little bit different because of Tessera. It's just really opened up a lot of opportunities for me.
So I just want to say this in case anyone is listening and saying, "Wait, was that?" It's Tessera Editorial, which is Tessera editorial.com, and their mission is to I'm just reading on the website here to open up the world of books to as many readers as possible and diverse voices with all editorial company of BIPOC editors. This is amazing. So is the I mean, it must be really energizing to be part of that mission and part of that group. And I mean, it's so exciting here. It's really a time when I feel like publishing finally recognized what we need to recognize, and lots of people are doing things about it. Do you feel that energy or that sense of things with that group?
Yeah, it's a very like international group as well. It's not just people based in the US. And so you get a lot of different perspectives. You know, we still have training and group meetings where we get to talk. And it just really feels like we're, I don't know. I don't know if it sounds too optimistic, but it sounds like we're trying to it feels like we're making a difference in some ways, you know? When I do a sensitivity read, I mean, we really get into, hey, here's the issues with the representation. And I feel that a lot of people actually take it on board and are making changes to books. So I think the work we do is amazing. I'm also trying to promote Author Accelerator and be like, hello, everyone, crossover, come over here and get some great training or whatever. So I've told a lot of people about it, but we'll see if we get to increase our coaches that way.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. What is if you could name your ideal customer as a coach, who would that person be?
So I think what I really enjoy is somebody who already has the craft aspects down. When I was a coach last year, I did those 4 books and it was people who had not really explored craft. So there was a lot of teaching, like very basic stuff. And I think for me, I don't like that. I really like when somebody just has like the basic craft. That way we can kind of elevate it and really talk about like, I like the idea of like a quilt, you know, and taking it apart, seeing how it's made and putting it back together without having to say, okay, this is how a book is structured or whatever. So I think probably a middle level writer who at least has read a couple craft books, has experience, and somebody who is doing something very fascinating. Speculative fiction really grabs my attention, anything science fiction, fantasy. But I like it when people are reimagining the world in like beautiful ways. Those are the stories that really pull me. Obviously, I haven't taken your class yet on like getting your zone of genius yet. But that's just kind of my first kind of outline of what I'm looking for.
I'm gonna send you a link for that one. But I mean, that was a great answer. It was a really great answer, and it makes sense given your training and the way that you probably think about things. And you do also enjoy the sensitivity reading. Is that something you would take people for as well?
Yeah, that is something that I really love. For my free time, because I love books, I read academic books, I read nonfiction books. And so I am very interested in history. In my own work, the themes that emerge constantly is that if you don't deal with history, then it's going to come back to bite you in the butt, right? It's like a haunting. And so I read a lot of history. I have a lot of kind of just very expansive knowledge, I think, about particularly United States history, our history of like race relations, all those things. And for me, it's like this amazing experience to read something and kind of deconstruct it and then contextualize it. I think that's what sensitivity reading really is. You know, when people write stories, sometimes they're not aware of the context that's surrounding maybe these tropes that they're using without realizing it. And so I think it's a great kind of teaching moment to explain not just, hey, this is bad, but this is why this is bad. And this is how you can fix a problem like this. It's like a puzzle, and I feel like a detective, and I just really enjoy that work a lot.
Are you able to give an example? I know it can be tricky because you don't want to betray anyone's trust or anything like that, but an example of something that you read from that context or that point of view of a sensitivity read that the author needed a deeper understanding of, just to bring it down to an example?
Yeah, I definitely can. So one example was when people write Black characters specifically, they often write white characters and just change their skin color.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a lack of understanding that Blackness means that you are making maybe different characterizations and different understandings or meanings of events, right? And so there was a book where there was a situation where a character was Black, but they were doing things that Black people wouldn't do. And that's not me making a generalization. It's just a Black person would not go to a KKK rally and be the only Black person, right? That doesn't make any sense. It's not logical.
Right.
And here's why that doesn't make sense in the world that you've built, but also in our world, right? Specifically, racial socialization, which we all get. Black kids start this really young. And so our parents explain the world, they contextualize it for us so we can make sense of it and navigate it as safely as possible. And so I bring a lot of that into these conversations with authors. Like, these people are not just white people with dark skin, right? They're not going to see, if you're in the Jim Crow South, they're not going to see that the same way as you as a white person. You might have all this nostalgia about this time period, but that segregation was actually violent. And so these group of people are behaving in ways because of that violence that kind of undergirds the system. And so it's just kind of contextualizing that so they understand that the characters that they've created are making different decisions.
Wow. And how do those conversations go? Do you find that somebody who's sought out a sensitivity reader is open to learning and changing what they've written? Or do you sometimes find that they're closed off?
I think they go normally well because we don't have a conversation. Normally,
Right.
if a publishing house hires me, it's through I'm dealing with the acquisitions editor and very rarely with the customer directly. But sometimes people come back and they say, hey, can she look at this again? Somebody recently just kind of took all of my advice and completely changed the character. And it turned out great. Their idea that they had was really amazing. They basically switched the races of the two girls. And so instead of there being all these problems with the Black character because they were kind of a negative presented character, they put it on the white character and it came off a lot better. And so sometimes, people come back to me, they say, I really appreciate it. We implemented your changes. Sometimes I never hear from people again. I've only had one conversation about a sensitivity read, and that's just because I did it outside of like a publishing house. But I don't really get a lot of direct contact to see how the author takes it. I try to incorporate all the things that we talk about tone and being gentle, understand this is not intention, but here's where this is coming from. So I try to incorporate all that and hopefully it lands well, but I don't always know what the end result is.
Yeah. And it seems that in the genres that you like to work in, like sci-fi or speculative fiction or that sort of thing, oftentimes those are writers grappling with some of these issues, either race or culture or class or, things like climate change, like the big issues of our time are being worked out in those novels. And that feels like a great place to do that sort of wrestling with the idea. Do you find that in those genres? Are you finding that I mean, that's just my perception. Do you see that in that work?
Yeah, definitely. I think, people are really struggling and anxious about our present times. There's a lot that's happening that is really negative. When you think about COVID, you think about climate change, it seems like the world is ending, but I think that's when the best literature gets produced. People are trying to grapple with it. And as a reader, I just want to have like a list of books. I'm like, if you could just read these books and you could understand it, you might feel better, right? But nobody's going to do that. People don't read like that normally. They have other things they want to do. Succession is on TV. They can watch Netflix. So people don't read. But if you craft a fiction story, if you think about like the Hunger Games or all the dystopian novels, if you craft a really good fiction story, people can get the message through the story. And so I think that's what leads a lot of people to kind of fiction writing, to fictionalize something instead of a nonfiction book. It draws people in, and you can have these really deep conversations without touching a nerve where people might be defensive, because it's not them, it's another society, it's another world. And so I think for me, as I was considering my own writing, it was like, I think this should be a nonfiction book, but I don't think people will read. And I want people to kind of understand what I'm trying to explain to them about the world. So I definitely think
I want to ask about that, because this is an area of just great interest to me, which is, well, obviously, because I wrote the blueprints, it's what happens at that idea stage and the different forms or directions that an idea can go. So
Mhm.
you have an idea that you considered writing nonfiction for?
I did. I think for me, like a life purpose of mine is really trying to help people understand the contextualization. That's the word. Help people try to understand how we got here. Because I think once you understand how we got here, then you can understand how to fix it. And if you look at any famous dystopian novel like Hunger Games, the first novel is always about the world as it is. But as the characters go through the novel, what they're doing is figuring out their origin story. If you think about the second one, they figure out how the world got created and why it's like that. And then they could, on the third book, try to change the world, you know? And so I think when I was thinking of this was 2017, I had this idea and I was like, we need to explain the origin story essentially of the United States to people. How, right? But you have to fictionalize it because there are plenty of history books that explain it, but you know, we're banning history and people don't read. And so I thought, well, if you explain it in kind of a parallel world, people might be able to grasp some of these difficult concepts. And that's why I thought about speculative fiction.
And is that what you're working on in your own work?
That is what I'm working on. And I've been working on it for a long time because I didn't have a book coach and I didn't understand how to do the process. So I had to teach myself and learn. But I have a book coach now. It's Erin. Erin Michelle Gibbs. Hello, shout out to Erin. And she's great. So we've been together for a year. And I've written more in this year than I have in the last 5 years. So it has been very effective at motivating me and holding me accountable and really kind of digging into the story. I'm an extrovert thinker, as you can see, I talk a lot. But I need that kind of brainstorming session with somebody just to talk it out, you know?
How did you connect with Erin? I mean, she's amazing. She's one of our Author Accelerator coaches, and I know she loves speculative fiction. I know she loves issues of social justice. So she's a great fit for you. How did you find her?
There's when I was applying or when I was going through the coursework to be an Author Accelerator book coach, I thought, you should just get a book coach because you'll get to see that, you'll get to go through the process and you'll understand what it feels like. And maybe you'll finish this book finally. And, you know, on the website, it says, you know, if you want a coach, you put in what you're looking for. And I think Gates was the one that was like, you know, I think there's a good coach for you. Erin probably will be great. So, you know, we had our initial call. We really connected. The topics and themes that I am talking about are very complex and difficult. And it could be a place where people might feel defensive about, like, if I say white supremacy or I say racism. But Erin is like, okay, tell me more about this. You know, she's super all in, and it's a very safe place for me to kind of explore these really weird ideas that people might be upset if they heard me talk about out loud.
I love that so much. I mean, I talk a lot about that. What a coach is doing is making a container for like a feedback loop for that idea and for that writer. And it has to be a safe space. In all ways, it has to be safe. Just even to float any idea and know that it's not going to be trampled or, you know, ridiculed or whatever. That's such a huge part of it. And I know that because I have a book coach too, right? So I know that as the writer as well, that you just having that trust and that safety is so important. I mean, it strikes me, I'm very well aware that we need more diverse book coaches, and it's something we're trying to work on as best that we can. Do you sometimes wish that you had a Black person to go to for that, or is that not impacting the experience?
I do think, like, I think there's just a different level that we could maybe talk on if I had a Black book coach. There's a lot of, Erin is great. This is not about Erin. Erin is great, and she has a really good understanding of this contextualization that I'm trying to do. So she's great. But I do think with another Black person, there's just a level of things that they might experience that I also experience that I'm trying to bring out in the world. And they would be like, oh, I can see that in a way that maybe a non-Black coach wouldn't be able to get it just because it's a lived experience issue.
Yeah.
And I, you know, when I was applying and when I fill out the form on the website, you know, I was like, you know, if you have, I think I maybe even said that if there is a Black coach, would love to talk to them about it. But Erin, again, is excellent, and she has done the work. And so she knows these things that I'm trying to talk about. And so it works really well. I don't feel that I'm missing anything necessarily.
So how do you have time to write your book and work with a book coach, do your book coaching practice and build that and have that as a side gig, and you have a full-time job with the Navy? Like, how do you do, and you're married, like, how do you do all the things?
I don't have kids. I think kids require a lot of work, especially when they're little. And that's not a bad thing, but it is something that allows you less time to yourself. So I have, I think, a lot more time than anybody who has kids. That's probably number one for me. Number two for me is probably, I don't know if I should say this out loud, but I'm a messy person. Like, I don't care that my house is messy sometimes, you know, and I married somebody who's very chill about it. I think, you know, if you watch like Instagram reels, we're basically all in the same marriage, right? Everybody's having the same arguments and fights, and you see this on TV or on Instagram reels or TikTok. You know, people are having these same arguments, and so I just don't let some things consume me. For me, I really try to focus on what matters most. You know, what is life-giving for me, and it's not having a clean house. What's life-giving for me is having time to read, a bath if I can do it every day, some space to work out. And for me, it's also recognizing I'm a morning person. If I wake up at 4:30, this is not bragging, but for me, if I can wake up at 4:30, I can do my workout, I can do some writing, I could get in the office at 6:30, do my job till 3:30, and then I can come home and do my editing work. And so for me, routine is very important, but it's also just really focusing on what matters most and just letting the stuff that I don't care about just kind of go away. I don't have to focus on that. I care about three things a lot, and then I care about everything else very, very little. So that's, for me, is what works.
Ah, that is so good. I care about three things a lot. That is so good. I mean, I have to ask, just because it's come up for me recently in my own life. A lot of my friends don't think I'm a very good friend. And they'll say, you know, it's hard to get me to, the reason it's come up is I just took a day off to celebrate. A friend of mine had a big milestone in her life, and we took a day and we all went and we did a thing. And that's really hard for me to do, even though I have total control of my time and it's my business and the whole thing. Taking a whole day off of not working feels, it has to really be a good reason for me to want to do that. And my friends totally know this about me and recognize this about me. So in some ways, the three things I care about almost take precedence over some relationships even too, which is something I'm not super proud of, but I think it's true. So I have to ask you about social things and how that fits in.
So even though I'm a book nerd, like most of us are, and I read a lot and I spend a lot of time by myself editing and writing, I'm also an extrovert. And so I actually, friendship is like one of the three things that I care about. And so it has been, I didn't get married. I'm 43. I say that just because I didn't get married till I was 41. So I was single this whole time. You know, I was traveling all over. I moved like 18 times with the Navy. And so for me, the thing that kept me really grounded in the support system that I had was and still is all these friends that I gathered. You know, I think it's a thing, but you know, friends are like your what's the word for like your person? For me, friends are really important, and so I make time to see people. And so I'll normally do brunch on Saturdays and Sundays with the people that I love. We live in DC, so all of my girlfriends are here, so I see a lot of them, and I do things pretty frequently with people. And again, that's one of the things I care about. So I do prioritize that, my relationships. But I really think for me, the thing is just, I try to keep track of my time lately. I do Toggle. I'm not trying to advertise or anything, but I've started to keep track of my time to see what my actual hourly effective rate is. You know, in my head, I think I read very fast. But then when you actually time it, you could see, okay, well, how much money are you actually making? How much time does it actually take to do these jobs? And I think for me, it's more of a, it really kind of holds me accountable. Like, okay, if you're spending 40 hours on this, maybe that's too much. And maybe the money's not worth it. Maybe you should just say no. And so because I have the day job, I have a lot more space also to say no. because I understand that like it's really easy to get burned out, even doing things that you really love. The day job has been difficult at a lot of points, to the point where I'm very into take a step back. And you and I were talking about doing all the body work, right? I had to go see a chiropractor. So I'm very into like really trying to take care of myself, because when you're at the computer all day, your neck starts to hurt, your back starts to hurt. And so that I think limits me in some ways. I can't do every job. And so I don't try to. I say, this is my goal for the year. I would like to make X amount of dollars, and I would like to get this experience and maybe have some time for these classes. And then I try to plan it out that way.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's great. And I mean, it's true, this idea of, I think a lot of people who are drawn to book coaching tend to be over deliverers. We get into it, we get into the idea, we get into the service aspect of it, and now we're just down this rabbit hole of spending a ton of time. And you do have to think about, is this sustainable energetically, financially, all the things. So I love that you're thinking that way. So you've talked a lot about how much you read both fiction and nonfiction. I would love to hear some of your recent favorite books, and especially, like you said, here's the stack of books. I think what you said was, here's the list of books to read to understand race relations in America. And I'm like, what is on that list? So I want to hear all of the books, that list, and then also just what you've read recently that you're loving in both nonfiction and fiction.
Oh, that's my favorite question. And we might be here for too long.
That's okay. I'm here for it.
I love books so much. So I have been reading a lot about Reconstruction. Reconstruction is a time period that started with the Civil War and then went afterwards, right? Where we really tried to implement a multiracial democracy that was overthrown by basically white Southerners with extreme violence, right? So you get the rise of the KKK and all these things. So I've been really kind of focusing on this time period, because the things that happened there are still the questions we're struggling with. We're talking about who can be a citizen, border security, all those things were like big topics and themes during Reconstruction. We're still seeing them now. So there's a great book by Kadada Williams, who is a historian. It's called I Saw Death Coming. And it kind of talks about these extreme violence that Black people faced during this time, and how they were able to still build these institutions, normally through the Black church or whatever. And so the writing is really smooth. If you like Isabel Wilkerson, who has a very kind of lyrical style, it's a very good read, even though it's hard to read. For fiction, I read this 2 years ago, but it's still my favorite book, so I always recommend it. It's called The Traitor, Baru Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. And the theme of that book is basically, the so what is basically, what is the line between subversion and complicity? And it is just, for me, it's like, what the book is about. It tells you in the title, but the way he actually delivers on that book is so good. There's also a book called The Spear Cuts Through Water, which is like science fiction and fantasy, but it's like told in this parallel world, and it's this really awesome story. I can't really tell you what that one's about, because it's just about a lot of different things, but it's written so well. Probably one of my favorite books that I've read this year. And then I'll say kind of that stack of books that I think people should read would probably be what was it called? When Affirmative Action Was White. It's really good. The Color of Money is excellent. The Color of, I think it's Neighborhoods. It's Richard Rothstein's book. That talks about redlining, also amazing. I think that I have the name of that wrong, but it was really good. And then there's another favorite of mine, and it's called Cold War Civil Rights. And so because I do a lot of diplomatic stuff, what Cold War Civil Rights by Mary Duduziak kind of proposes is that the civil rights movement, basically, obviously it was 12 years long, and it took a long time, but one of the major reasons why it was effective is because of the time period where it happened. We were starting the Cold War with Russia. The developing world was really kind of throwing off the chains of colonialism, and America wanted to be seen as more progressive than Russia. Because, when we say, look at the Russia and their human rights abuses, they say, well, what about your Negroes? And so this book is really good because, again, contextualization. It puts the civil rights movement, which happened in the United States, in the context of this broader movement. And so I think reading those 4 books will probably give you a good start. But yeah, that was it, I guess.
Wow. Why are you not a professor of this topic? I mean, you sound neither like a chemist nor I mean, I guess you sound like a book coach, but it sounds like, I mean, you really have gone. I did not know a single one of the books you just mentioned. I have not heard of. And
Oh, really?
I consider myself to be relatively well read, and I did not know a single one of them. And your grasp of them and how they fit together, and I love the way you talk about the experience of the book as well as the topic of the book. I could have just, like, sign me up for your course. Like, that was amazing.
Maybe that'll be my next career. When I finally get to retire in a couple of years, maybe that's my next career, something on the horizon. So I changed my name. So, whenever you have a name change, I feel like it's a different stage in your life is starting. I'm now Jada Lightning. I used to be Jada Johnson for a long time. And so I feel like, if you think about like religious texts is a great example. Like if you think about the Bible, like when people's names change, it's because they were coming back to like, they were coming more to themselves, who they were supposed to be and doing what they were supposed to be. If you think about Saul, the Paul and all that stuff. So I think with this name change, maybe it's also going to be a milestone or a career change in some way. So we'll see. Maybe I'll be a professor one day. I love the idea, but I don't know if I could actually teach. So we'll see.
Well, I love hearing your story. I truly do. And how you came to this work and what you're doing with it and how you're amplifying it. And it's just so exciting to me. So thank you for telling your story to us.
Thanks, Jennie, for having me. I love Author Accelerator. I love the blueprint. It's such a great diagnostic tool. I use it for everything. I look at it I use that lens on my sensitivity reads. I use it on my dev edits, and it is so practical. And I'm so glad that I found Author Accelerator. So I can't thank you enough. I don't know if that's coming off as genuine as I wanted to and authentic, but I really love the program. And I think that, I think the way that you handle things is very courageous. I was on Twitter when all that stuff happened about the incubator, and I thought the way you really addressed it, I was like, yeah, I'm glad I'm part of this group. You really addressed it head on. And you said, this is the choice that we made, and this is why, and this is the response to it. And that's okay. And I just really, I really love this group, and I love being a book coach. So thank you for creating it.
Well, I have to thank you because your presence and your brain and your experience and everything is making us what we are. I mean, every book coach is making us what we are. I've just made a container. Again, I've just made a container, and it's the people who are in it. And having people like you is I'm just so proud of what you're doing. And you are, and the Tessera editorial group, changing an industry that needs changing, and that's courageous. And I'm just so glad you're doing it. So keep it up.
Thanks, Jennie. I appreciate it.
Thank you.